Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Gregorian. I'm the president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. And I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting, and I especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a DEC member yet, allow me 10 seconds to convince you. Your next client, prospect, job, friend is probably in this room. So we're simply looking for you if you want to build your network and hear from thought leaders like the ones you'll hear on stage today. And you can sign up at econclub.org. And because it's a new year and we want you to meet your networking goals, if you're not a member and you want to sign up today, we're going to give you a free event ticket you can use between our next event through June. And you can see Megan at registration after the program. So thank you for considering that. I would ask you to silence your cell phones so we do not disturb today's program. And if you've been with us before, you know we always get started with a pledge and a prayer. And I would ask you to please stand and join me as we honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by the Reverend Jeffrey Drutchess, President, Fish and Loaves Community Pantry. Reverend?
Thank you. Let's bow our heads for a moment of reverence and prayer. Oh God, at a time in our nation's life when the values that once united us as a people appear to be cruelly seared and fraying, restore to us a vision of what it means to act and speak with moral integrity, committed to the common good. Help us in private and public business alike to set selfish purpose aside that we may honor your nobler intentions for our lives, as proclaimed in every place and age by true prophets and wise teachers. Furnish us all with hope, courage, and faith, what we need to persevere and prevail in goodness and righteousness against that which is destructive and evil, so that our children and our children's children, if not ourselves, will live to see a better day and a kinder, gentler way of life. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend, and you may all be seated. A couple of quick shout-outs, if I could. Thank you to Detroit Public TV and Lawrence Tech University for their live stream of today's DEC meeting, and a special thank you to our friends at Business Leaders for Michigan. When we last hosted Jeff right here on this stage in May, I told them we need to pick up the pace of DEC meetings with Business Leaders from Michigan because these issues are so important to city, region, state, and to all of you DEC members. So when Jeff's organization released their latest benchmarking report, I picked up the phone and called Randy and Jeff right away and reminded them about our conversation. So here we are today. Thank you to Jeff and team for being with us. So. We love, as you know, having high school and college students with us at each meeting. These students are here courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors. Their morning began with a private reception with Rachel and Jeff. I want to take a quick minute and let you know who is in the room with us today. We've got students from Wayne State University Finance Club, thanks to Deloitte and David Parent, appreciate that. River Rouge High School, thanks to Jeff and the Business Leaders from Michigan. And then two groups from the greatest school in the land, the Michiganders School. Okay, I'm on the board, I can say that. And those are sponsored by Marriott Ford Motor Company. Thank you, Mary, and Stephen Davis, Comerica Bank. So how about a round of applause to welcome our students and thank our sponsors. Two quick things on your table. First, our season lineup. Our next scheduled DEC meeting will be March 10th when we will be hosting the Detroit Red Wings. It's an annual event, and we are planning on having players at every table again like we used to do pre-pandemic. So get your tickets for that. They're going fast. And on March 28th, speaking of going really fast, we're going to examine what it takes for women to thrive in leadership roles today. And to do that, we will host Janet Foudy, Executive Board Chair of Deloitte, along with our very own Linda Hubbard from Carhartt and our DEC Board Chair, Sandy Pierce. And I can tell you, Tickets are almost gone for that 2 months out. So you want to get back and order those tickets before they are sold out. Hope you can join us at any of these and also any upcoming meetings. We've got a lot more coming your way. And the last thing on your table is the most important. It's our corporate sponsors and partners. We cannot thank them enough. We would not be here if it wasn't for their generosity. They are the reason we can bring you programs like today's. And of course, you know I love to talk about this date in DEC history. We've got an incredible history of speakers that tell the history of our country. And Jeff and Rachel, January 31st is a popular date in the DEC's 89-year history. You both now join a distinguished list of 13 other speakers who graced our stage on this day. And the first one began way back in 1938, remember the year, Sir Herbert Brown Ames, a prominent Canadian businessman and member of Canadian Parliament, addressed the DEC, and his speech title was, "Does the Germany-Italy-Japan Pact mean another world war?" And of course, we now know the answer, unfortunately. And World War II continued to be the theme when in 1944, the 43rd Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, titled his DEC address, "Battles on the Home Front During and After the War." Detroit's mayors visited the DEC on today's date. 1966, Mayor Jerome Kavanaugh. 1995, Mayor Dennis Archer. And so today, Rachel and Jeff, we're pleased to add you as our 14th and 15th speakers on this day in DEC history. So congratulations and thanks to both of you for being with us. And finally, we want you to use your smartphone and be involved in today's program. Take lots of pictures, share with your social media using #EconClub. And you can also submit a question for our panel, and instructions are on your table and probably on your screen at some point. And those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who is about to be put to work. Mary Culler is a very, very busy person. She's president of the Ford Fund, chair of Michigan Central, where an amazing transformation is taking shape before our very eyes. She's a DEC board member, good friend of the DEC and me personally, and also a staunch supporter of so many things in our city, state, region, and country. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mary Culler.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve. And good afternoon, DC members. It's fantastic to see everybody today. I know you're all enjoying talking to each other and, just sort of networking again. So it's wonderful to see how many people are here today. I have the great pleasure of introducing our speakers, who I have had a wonderful time this morning, get to know better. Jeff actually used to work at Ford, so it's good to see him again. But let's talk a little bit about Jeff. In October 2020, Jeff was named President and CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. Prior to that, Jeff served as Director of the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, the City of Detroit as Executive Director of Workplace Development, and as a Policy Executive at Ford Motor Company. He has also worked for the legendary Congressman John Dingell and for Governor Granholm. Jeff earned his BA from MSU and his MBA from Georgetown University. And finally, Jeff is a DEC member. Turning now to Rachel. Rachel Stewart is the 4th generation president of Gardner White Furniture. In 2022, Stewart received the Furniture Industry Leader Award from Furniture Today, and Gardner White was voted among the best places to work nationally in 21 and 2022 by the publication. Rachel graduated from U of M with a BA degree in Business Administration and earned an MS degree in Economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Rachel is also a Business Leaders for Michigan member and a DEC member as well. Our moderator today is Dustin Walsh, a senior reporter for Crain's Business Detroit, who covers healthcare with a focus on industry change and operations, as well as the state's emerging cannabis industry. Dustin is also a regular columnist on all things health, labor, economics, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Jeff, Rachel, and Dustin. And now I would like to invite Jeff to come up for some remarks. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks, Mary, for that wonderful welcome and introduction, and Steve as well. Mary, of course, is one of our board members. We're very proud to have her as a Business Leaders for Michigan member. So today I'm going to talk to you about the state of our state. What is happening in Michigan, what challenges and opportunities we have ahead. And I hope at the end of this that you'll be willing to sign up and join the cause. So about a year ago, we came in and we talked about our new plan for how Michigan becomes a top 10 state, Compete to Win. That plan encompassed a number of different, I think, priorities that all of us share, and we'll get to that in a second. But Business Leaders for Michigan, the good Reverend talked about coming together for the common good and making sure that we put aside political differences. That's exactly what Business Leaders for Michigan was designed to do. We represent the largest companies in Michigan. Our membership is made up exclusively of their CEOs and top executive within their Michigan operations. They're people who really employ more than 500,000 of the residents of our state. They represent 40% of our state's economy. They generate $1 trillion of annual revenue, and they educate over half of our public university students. So a very powerful group that, again, is geared towards trying to make sure Michigan can become a top 10 state, that prosperity is widely shared, and that the common good is advanced. Part of our work is to benchmark how we stack up against other states. We've done this almost every year since our founding. Now, the good news is that Michigan's made a lot of improvement since the Great Recession when we were at the bottom. We were 50 out of 50 in most categories. In the last couple of years, we've gotten more to average. Last year, we were 29th, but the game is never static. Our competitors are always investing. They're always doing more. They're always trying to challenge Michigan's place within the world. And because of that, even though we grew in many categories, other states grew faster, and we slipped back a couple of points. So today, we're ranked 31st. You can see we measure our rankings based on labor force participation, how many people of working age are in the workforce, GDP, household income, poverty, net business creation, and business climate. These are important factors that tell us a holistic look at how our economy is doing and how our state is going to fare in the future. So when we look at where states are succeeding, where the top 10 states really are beating Michigan at these measures, we see that top 10 states are really strong in their education systems, particularly their K-12 and community college systems. They're leading in business creation. They make it easy for entrepreneurs to expand, to grow in their own states, to come to their states. And they lead, most importantly, I think, here in population and talent. More people are moving to these states. More people are choosing to build their lives, to raise families in these states, and it's helping propel them to higher echelons. If you look at the three states that entered into the top 10 just this year, Idaho, Tennessee, and New Hampshire, population growth is what drove them there. Idaho and New Hampshire in particular, because of the COVID pandemic and because of some of the population moves from the east and west coast, from high-cost regions to more low-cost regions, have benefited. So certainly Idaho, which is a two-hour plane ride from San Francisco, has a lot more tech workers these days. Now, whether those trends hold is going to be a question, with the future of work continuing to evolve. But a state that has really defied the odds for decades now is Tennessee. And I want to talk a little bit about that. 6 years ago, Tennessee was ranked pretty close to where we are today. In fact, they were a little bit worse. They were 34th. But Tennessee had been investing in a number of things over decades. They had done things around economic competitiveness to invest in site development. That's making sure that we have shovel-ready sites for businesses who want to come to the state and bring jobs. They did things to make sure that they were planning for how to win the EV jobs of the future. Multiple governors ago, multiple senators ago, they had conversations about the fact that this would be the future of the industry, and they would make themselves ready for those investments. The result of that was, the most recent investment we saw from Ford Motor Company, $5.8 billion, a new campus, the Blue Oval site, and a host of other announcements that is transforming the landscape in Tennessee. In 2009, 14 years ago, they decided that their K-12 system wasn't performing. They took a holistic approach to how to solve the education problem for their state, something that balanced outcomes, high-performing outcomes, with accountability and resources that were necessary to make the change happen. And today, they're the third in the nation for academic growth. Again, a 14-year endeavor that they have consistently looked at and been persistent on. 10 years ago, they looked at post-high school education and said, we have to have the most talented workforce. We have to make sure that we are the #1 state for talent when people are looking for investment in jobs. They created the Hope Scholarship, the Tennessee Promise, the Tennessee Reconnect. 100,000 students a year are benefiting from that program. And virtually everyone in Tennessee, regardless of their income, can pursue a college credential at little to no cost to themselves. This is opening up huge opportunity for their state. And what's resulting here is that last year they were 16th. This year they've entered the top 10 at 9th because they have they're first in GDP per capita growth. They're first in poverty decline because they're tackling some of the big systemic issues that keep people in poverty, that are now breaking intergenerational poverty in their state. And they're first in business creation and 7th in talent migration. This is a state we can learn a lot from. So how can Michigan replicate Tennessee's success? Well, we can compete to win by focusing in 4 areas. We can do better by our kids, focusing on that systemic K-12 reform that's going to take years. It's not a one solution. It's not a one program solution. It's not a silver bullet. We have to look at this from a holistic perspective. We have to invest in people to become the state with the most talented workforce, most highly educated workforce, and workforce that has a career pathway that gives opportunity for all. We've got to remove those barriers to work that happen, and we've seen a lot of that, especially in the COVID era with, for example, childcare. We've got to accelerate our economy because one of the things that's key to being a talent magnet is having economic opportunity for folks to actually take jobs, to raise families. That is something where we have to both, I think, protect our core within mobility. We have to continue to be the mobility leader in the country, but we also have to make sure that we're diversifying. Professional services was the highest growth category for jobs within the country over the last 20 years. It raised about 20% of new jobs within the country. Michigan had zero growth within that category over the last 20 years. So if we want to win in the next 20 years, we're going to have to focus on making sure we can bring and create more of those jobs here. And then lastly, we have to have the fundamentals right. And this is infrastructure investment, this is fixing the damn roads, this is making sure that we are a welcoming state for everyone, whether that's immigrants, whether that's protections for the LGBT community and the like, and that we're making it a hell of a lot easier for businesses and entrepreneurs that we're saying, we want you here, and we're going to help you to grow. So the good news is that we've seen a lot of investments over the last year in these categories. We've had some of the largest increases in K-12 funding, particularly equitable funding that goes to those in poverty, that goes to those who are further behind. Now, we've not yet seen that hit the educational rankings, but this is a good start. We've seen increases in the teacher pipeline, helping teachers be able to get through their college studies at lower costs and be able to attract more of those professionals to help our kids succeed. We've seen things like the investment in people through a creation of our own Reconnect program that takes anybody over the age of 25 who doesn't have a college degree and gives them a tuition-free path to community college. We've seen the expansion of four-year scholarships as well, because that's incredibly important that we have more bachelor's degree in our workforce. We've accelerated economic growth, 12,000 new jobs in transformational investments that have come to our state, $20 billion of private investment. That's more than the 3 years before it combined. So you can, I think, see that we are making progress here. The question is, will we make progress in the future? And Michigan does have some big challenges ahead, not the least of which is population growth. So I'm sure many of you saw recent stories about census numbers that came out. Michigan was one of 18 states that lost population in 2021. We lost population in 2020 as well. And that's partially because we had more deaths than births. This is a COVID-related problem as well. That pushed us over the top to say that that number flipped. Now, we had been predicting before COVID that that probably would happen in 2030 or 2040. So our demographics put us as an older state. And we're not going to, unfortunately, be able to grow from births alone. So that means we have to do things to really punch above our weight, to be scrappy, and to be hungry for how it is we're going to become a talent magnet. And it's important because when we ask CEOs, when we ask business leaders, what's their biggest challenge, 80% of them say it's the struggle to fill jobs, to find talent to fill jobs today. I'm sure many businesses and business leaders in the room today would agree with that. They also say the number one factor when they're making a decision around where to put a new plant, where to put a new office, where to grow their company is the availability and the quality of talent. So it is absolutely critical that we get this right to grow and fill our talent needs today and in the future. And a big part of that is, I think, looking at who we have in the labor force. Our labor force participation rate is 39th in the country. So can we increase the number of people who are here in the state, who are actually working, who are progressing in a career? That starts with our K-12 system. It's the foundation of so much of the success a person is going to have in life. And we asked Michiganders where they think the K-12 system is today. How is it performing? We did this in a voter poll throughout the state in February of last year and in September. And in both polls, they put us pretty much in the middle, 26. Now, the reality is something very different. Our actual ranking is we're 40th by kids count. Fourth grade reading, we're 40th. High school graduation, we're 42nd. And those numbers are going in the wrong direction. This is the foundation for our success and the success of any state. And if this doesn't concern us, and if this isn't the one thing we are trying to do everything to change, we're missing the boat, and we're not going to be a top 10 state. So the good news is here, though, that we are growing as a state from migration. So people are moving here, people who are adults over the age of 18 in the workforce. Over 9,000 this last year moved to the state of Michigan. Now, we're not as large as top 10 states, which are getting closer to 60,000, but 9,000 is respectable. There's two real stories here, though, in the data. The first is that in the war for talent, we're losing to other states. So even though we're gaining population overall, we're losing population to other states. More Michiganders are moving somewhere else in the country. We lost around 8,500 people last year. And we lost them really to those top 10 states, those growing states. We'll talk about that in a second. So where they're growing, or where they're going, is really to those warmer regions, those tech hubs. They're seeking opportunity. They're seeking quality of life. They're seeking vibrant communities where they can grow and raise a family. 90% of those who moved over the last decade were under 35. So we're losing our young talent, which should concern us all. Now, we are attracting young talent, and where we're attracting young talent from is the Great Lakes region. 80% of those who are moving to the state who are under 25 are coming from our neighboring states, Chicago being the top place we're getting young talent from. But we're also getting from Toledo and South Bend, rural Ohio, rural Indiana. Those folks are seeing Michigan as a place for opportunity, and if we lean in here more, I think we can get a higher percentage of individuals coming into our state. So how else can we look at this? I mean, I know many of us, and I'm one of those folks who had family members who moved to Chicago. Anybody else have somebody they know who moved to Chicago? Okay. So we've always thought of Chicago as being sort of the enemy in talent migration. Well, I can tell you this, over the last 10 years, we've actually gained more workers from Chicago than we lost, 500 more. Now, we lose a lot of young people, but they're coming back. So over age 25, we're actually seeing almost 7,000 more people coming back into Michigan than we lose. So that's a positive sign. That's a good sign for us. Where we're also gaining, and where we need to keep in mind as this immigration debate goes on in Washington, is we're gaining through immigration. We're number 16 in the country in international immigration. We're doing pretty well. We're pretty close to top 10 states on this. The United States as a whole, unfortunately, is down. It's partially because we have changed immigration policies. We made it harder to get into the country. But as a country that has really grown because of immigration, that's got to reverse. And at some point, the dam will break in Washington, but there are a lot of things we can be doing here in the state of Michigan to be the most welcoming state, to punch above our weight, to help people get through the immigration process and connect them with jobs, because we need that talent today, not just for population growth, but to make sure that they are entrepreneurs who come to this state and want to open business. They want to be able to grow businesses. It's essential for us. So ultimately, what we do today is going to define us in the next coming decades. Whether we are able to become a top 10 state, whether we're able to move out of this place in the middle that we've been stuck in for the last few years, is going to depend on if we can do things in the near term and in the long term. If we can be consistent with our approach to these issues in solving problems that are not silver bullets. It's going to take harder work. It's going to take us coming together, thinking of that common good. Things like in the near term, making sure that we enact universal pre-K. It's an issue that is helpful for a child's outcome in life, but it's also something that only 9 other states do. If you can remove the cost of childcare as a burden, that's huge. Working family tax credits, making sure that people are rewarded for work, especially those who are closer to poverty. Making sure that we expand Elliott Larson so individuals in the LGBT community have protections, that we are a welcoming state. And then making sure that we have the tools to attract jobs. In the long term, we've got to drive that systemic reform in K-12. If you're not outraged that we're 40th in the country, and if you're not outraged that the United States is near the bottom of industrialized world, you're not paying attention. And we have to make sure that all of us are demanding change. We've got to remove barriers to work to make sure that people can advance in their career. We've got to provide jobs and economic opportunity, so diversifying our economy, making starting and expanding a business, like many entrepreneurs in the room, make it much easier, and then again, be that welcoming state for all. I hope you're going to join us in the fight, and I would thank you for all of your time and attention today. Visit businessleadersformichigan.com if you want to find out more and sign up, and I'd invite Dustin and Rachel to join me on the stage.
And thank you, Jeff, for the wonderful presentation. I want to start with a thing that I think was most critical that continually comes up when we talk about this and came up quite a few times out of your presentation, is this idea of consistency.
Yeah.
I'm struggling for how we get there. I assume that we're not going to solve the national, if not global, political climate tomorrow. How do we get consistent leadership when it doesn't matter what side goes in office next? There's going to be a battle. There's going to be a destruction of what the person before them did.
Yeah.
How do we demand consistency?
Well, I think that goes to the challenge of what perception is by the public. So if the public doesn't believe that there's an urgency around K-12 reform, for instance, if they think we're average in the middle, they're not going to demand consistency in an approach to fix the K-12 system. So one of the biggest things we've tried to do as Business Leaders for Michigan is make sure that we're educating the public, telling them what the challenge is, where we rank, how it is that our kids are actually, our best performing kids are actually performing under the best performing kids in other states. We have to be able to make sure that we're messengers to our fellow neighbors to say, this is a challenge and here's how to solve it. Here's what best states are doing. If we don't do that, it's really, really tough for a policy, a change to live out someone's political term, to live out even the news cycle of the day at times.
Right, and is that a fear of, if you're going into political office, you have 4 years, hopefully 8, depending on where you are. Is that a fear of, this is a long-term problem that needs to be solved? This is something that needs to take a decade, maybe more, and you're not going to get necessarily that check at the end of your term?
Well, politicians and elected officials, of course, always have to be elected. And, this is something they have to present to the voters of what they've done in each of these spaces. And so I think the best politicians and elected officials are balancing that need, trying to show the wins, trying to bring along people, in that success that builds towards a longer change. I think it's a challenge. I'm glad to see that with term limits changing, we'll have legislators in office potentially for longer in leadership positions. So, when you have a new Speaker of the House every 2 years, when you have a new committee chair for education, let's say, every 2 years, there's not a lot that can be done because that person is learning their job in the first year. And then in the second year, maybe they get a chance to do some things, but it's a very short period of time to enact that kind of change.
Right. And Rachel, I want to, before we get into education too deep, I want to go to you. Not that you can't answer on education, but
Not in a qualified way.
well, that speaks for me too. You were at the DOE, okay, and so we saw you were instrumental in sort of launching programs and getting programs sort of going.
Yep.
That's a long-term view that works through political cycles.
Yep.
How does that approach work? How is the approach different maybe on that federal level than maybe the state level?
I think it's similar. So I should say DOE is Department of Energy, not education. So I'm really.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
yeah, no, I'm not credible on education. Solar energy, maybe. So I think, that there's not an answer. I mean, we started an initiative called Sunshot off based on President Kennedy's moonshot. In this case, go to the moon. In this case, to get solar cost competitive with coal by 2020. And I should say at the time when we came out with it, we were absolutely nuts. But then, thanks in part to a lot of things, including cheap Chinese manufacturing, we started to be a lot less nuts, and we actually achieved that. But one thing we did is, I think it's the narrative that surrounds it. So our whole thing was, and I think the government's notoriously bad at this, our thing was not, by 2020 to be out of the game of incentives, and that was our narrative. And I think, government does really well with incrementalism, and we'll keep funding this, and we'll keep funding this, and then there's vested interests. And that wasn't our model, and I think that helped us curry favor on both sides. And I would say there's a lot of just, I don't know, I'll call it administrative, organizational things that you can do to be more successful. One thing I saw very clearly at DARPA that we emulated at ARPA-E for energy, and that we tried to emulate in Sunshot, but again, you need the statutory authority to do these things, is we brought in experts for 3 years who were willing to leave places like MIT and Stanford with a very clear purpose. So that gives a sense of urgency to their work. And I'm such an advocate, and then it also brings top talent into government, which never is a bad thing. But I think there's ways you can make it a little more strategic and, again, urgent.
Okay. Now I want to get into education, because I will never, ever understand how Tennessee passes so fast. It just boggles my mind. So I want to know how the hell they did it, and why aren't we emulating it? And so give us a little background on how they accomplished it.
Yeah, again, they've been doing this for a while, and so that consistency is important. They had a deeper hole to climb out of, too. So even though their absolute numbers sometimes are trailing Michigan, it's the growth rate that you really need to pay attention to. Being third in the nation, really making sure that they have a very high standard that they're trying to reach. I think, Dustin, we were talking about before this that they actually made their curriculum harder in their schools. And what happened is that many of the students who were struggling actually were doing better than students in states that were considered to be succeeding. But what they did was they tried to balance out the three things that we've been focused on as well, those outcomes. What is the goal for our education system? What should a high school diploma represent in this state? Is it simply that they attended all their classes and we move them along on a year-by-year basis, or is it something else? I'll reference another state, Maryland. They said a high school diploma represents that you can test out of any community college entry-level class. So you should be able to go into a community college and go right into your studies and not have to go into remedial education. That's what a high school diploma should look like. And then they built back their K-12 system to represent that. Tennessee's done something similar. They've made sure that the resources are there, that equitable resources are there as well. And they make sure that the governance is right. Right now we have a very, I think, balkanized system here in Michigan, where we have lots of school districts. We have a state board of education who selects a superintendent, which is not connected to the governor, not connected to the legislature. So you really don't have anybody who has the power and authority to make this change work as we're structured. Tennessee was able to do different things there. And I think, again, because they've been persistent on it and they've put the right structure in place, right resources, and set the right goal, they're making progress.
How do we do that, though? How do we get a unified education department? How do we get someone with the authority? Is that constitutional change? Is that simply just political willpower?
It's all of the above. So we're part of an organization called Launch Michigan. Launch has put together a framework for education reform that has exactly what we've talked about, those three big items, balanced out within really a plan for the state. We're hoping that policymakers, the governor, the legislature, are going to take that up and use it as the basis for the reform we need over the next decade. But if we want to change the governance system, that is going to be a constitutional amendment. If we want to have more revenue and funding in education, we're going to have to look and see what makes sense there. And if we're going to make some hard choices here that, I think it's going to cause pain within the system, we have to recognize that, we're not failing as an education system because of teachers or administrators. They're doing the best job they can in the system we've designed for them, a system that doesn't meet the needs of the economy.
Right. And I want to go back to funding because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Tennessee still ranks 44th in funding
Yeah.
for per pupil education funding. We're 15th. If anything, that shows how inefficient our system is compared to theirs. I mean, but we still require more money to do it. And I think that's going to be a political talking point at least.
Yeah.
It's certainly a debate that goes on pretty consistently is where the funds are going. How do we make that work?
Let me give you two examples of places we can find more funding without raising another dime of tax revenue. The first is in efficiencies. So we have 700 plus districts in this state. If we could just combine some back offices, use common accounting systems, common transportation systems. We have a study that says that's close to $1 billion a year that could go directly into the classroom. The other is in debt, in teacher pension debt that we are paying right now. $3 billion a year is going in just to pay that debt off. If we could eliminate that debt, if we could pull forward that payoff, that's $3 billion going into the classroom. That's close to what we think we need to make sure that we have equitable per pupil allocations.
Right. And Rachel, I want to sort of bridge that with you. Is there, I mean, Gardner White had a great opportunity with Art Van sort of leaving. You're in a very fraught industry at the moment of is it all online shopping? What do people want in person? You're being pulled in a lot of different directions. Where does talent kind of go with that? Because we're used to sort of, the public facing is, person in the commercials, or maybe, the salesman you run into.
Right.
Where does talent sort of arrive in that and how that industry may progress to needing, I guess, higher degrees of talent?
Well, I mean, I think first, I don't think I could say enough about the need for talent. I mean, I think of myself as the chief recruiter and spend a fair portion of my day doing that all day, every day. But I think there's so many ways, but I think first, technology is just the obvious one. I mean, there's no question. I think that, it's a longer conversation than we have time for here about how brick and mortar really stays relevant. But among the many things is going to be who integrates technology the most elegantly in a way that makes it easier for a consumer. So I think that's number one. And then there's a ton of innovation in consumer finance. And we've always been a national leader there in offering really aggressive programs and low-cost programs. And I think that's going to require some real creative thought that transcends different sectors. So to the extent there's really smart minds here, that's helpful.
Okay. And I want to move on sort of to this idea of migration. Jeff knows, and some other people probably know, I've been pounding the pulpit on immigration and population specifically for the state of Michigan for the better part of a decade. We were an international migration hub historically. That's been slipping. It's been slipping for us, but it's also been slipping nationally through certain changes in immigration reform. What can we do as a state? Because it's such a federal, the feds are setting the rules. So what can we do as a state to be welcoming for the limited number of immigrants that may be coming in, a smaller number, if we can't expand it or demand that the feds expand it?
Yeah, it's interesting too because the immigrants that are coming into our state right now, more than 70% have a post-secondary degree or credential. More than 50% have a bachelor's degree. That's higher than our incumbent population. So those folks coming in are really valuable sources of talent, and I think the business community is trying to reach out to them, trying to continue to make those connections and help them find opportunity in the state. We as a state, I think, can do a lot of other things. The paperwork is onerous for immigration.
Yes, it is.
The barriers, for someone who's not familiar with our systems is just, awful. Never want anybody to go through this. We could provide caseworkers and counselors to help them go through that.
Sure.
We could do things that continue to market Michigan, I think, to both national or domestic migration, but also international migration. We can continue to, I think, be individuals who reach out to immigrants and try to make them comfortable within our communities. What is not helpful is when people see terrible things about Michigan on television or in the papers. They see that someone's plotting to assassinate our governor. When they see political infighting and when they see violence in our communities. We've got to make sure that we are a welcoming state in multiple different ways.
And then I want to kind of bridge a little bit over to traditional economic development. Although K through 12 is obviously the foundation, we're getting lapped in a lot of areas. It was a huge deal when Ford selected Tennessee versus Michigan. We're seeing sort of those big losses. I would argue, you can have it sometimes, but available tax incentives don't appear to necessarily be the linchpin here in the decision-making process. As you put up on the board there, it was talent for most. Yep. But what are these other states doing, like a Tennessee or Georgia, or what are they doing generally with fewer resources than we have, better than we're doing? Because that's always sort of been the gap that drives me the craziest is we're good at throwing money at things, but we're not really good at following through on the process.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it goes to the fundamentals. I think our agenda is built on trying to make a state that needs less incentives, less Band-Aids put on to get people over the finish line to come here to invest. Whether that's a large manufacturing facility or whether that's an R&D office that chooses Michigan. So that does start with K-12. And I'll just give you a story. When, the benefit of being CEO of this organization is I get to talk to a lot of CEOs. I have 100 of them on my board. And I've heard multiple times CEOs tell me that when they try to recruit talent from, let's say, Europe or even the coast, what they'll find is that they have kids, they look at the local schools, even the top performing schools, and they find their kids are 3 grade levels ahead of where Michigan students are. What parent is going to make that choice? So the challenge we have is yes, K-12, it's infrastructure. It's making sure that we have site development. One of the things that Tennessee did, with not a huge amount of money over time is combine and get that Blue Oval site ready and true shovel readiness. Not saying that we have a site identified, but actually we can break ground in months rather than years. They also do things on, I think, customer service and regulatory. And this is somewhere I think Rachel can talk about, the ease of actually, not sacrificing anyone's safety, any environmental safety, any quality of Michigan life, but making sure that this process is understood, transparent, and easy to go through. And Rachel, I don't know if
I wanted Rachel to comment on that.
Well, so first as you're talking, I think it's not just incentives, it's time is really money. So, just to throw money at it, but take 4 times as long as a different state, we're going to lose every time. So I think that's one. 2, I think what we don't talk about a lot is local regulation, which are so markedly different. We opened a lot of stores last year. In some cases, it couldn't have been more seamless, and it was a great experience working in the city. In others, literally, you couldn't get a call back from an inspector to get a CO, and our contractor literally had to stake out their office for a week. This is a really skilled guy, not a good use of his time, simply to get a call back. I mean, to the point where there was one city, we found a great plumbing inspector. He was terrific. Can you help us? Can you introduce us to someone? Ma'am, I'm sorry, I have to sit there in the same 800 number that you do. I don't know anyone there.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Right.
That's a challenge. But Dustin, I'll say, if we can get these things right, and I think the state is trying really hard to work on each of these categories, but we're not there, and it's going to take time to get there so that we're a top-performing state that has those foundational elements. So incentives and making sure that we don't lose in the short term still are really important, because there's a huge transition going on in the automotive industry that is never going to happen in probably our lifetime again, where investments and new plants and changeover of product could put at risk 170,000 jobs or more in Michigan. If we don't get that right, that's communities that are going to die. So we have to make sure that we have the tools to continue to help with that automotive transition. And then there's a lot of other spaces, like in onshoring because of the global supply chain disruptions, like in semiconductor manufacturing that are growing right now. And if we aren't in the game, Michigan's going to be losing for a lot longer than just the next couple of years.
Sure.
One other opportunity I think we really have, and we're unique in that sense, is I think, especially as you're looking at early stage manufacturing, there's unlimited benefits from what I've seen in co-locating research and early stage manufacturing. And I think Michigan has so many unique capacities there to do that better than anyone else, and it's really an opportunity to lean in. I mean, you learn a lot in the manufacturing process. That's why you scale up, and to have top, across the hall, top talent research really will facilitate, I think, new technologies coming to market faster here.
I agree with that. All right, we have no time left, but Jeff, I want you to, out of all these recommendations, I mean, there is no silver bullet, moonshot, whatever we want to call it, but like, what is the most critical thing? What is the thing that everyone in this room can pretty much pick a phone and talk to someone in Lansing? What is it that they should be talking to them about?
So you should be talking about K-12 reform. I think keeping our eye on the ball to make sure that we have a K-12 system that is growing in student performance, that is trying to reach an outcome, which means that we're going to be best in the country and world class, is going to affect every other thing that's happening in this state. So if there's one thing I would tell you to talk to your legislator about, it's making sure that they don't take a silver bullet approach. They don't just focus on one issue, but they're looking at systemic reform, and they're going to make sure that it doesn't end with them in office, that it's going to be their successor too that takes it up.
Right, marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank you, Jeff and Rachel, for being here, and thank you for everyone else for being here as well. And that's all for us for now.
I think we have Mary coming up for audience questions, so thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Dustin, we'll give you a question too if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
I know nothing, but I'll answer it very confidently.
Okay, good.
Wow, that was sobering, I think. So, I know everyone in this room wants Michigan to win. So I think, this conversation today is really timely, and I really appreciate everything you have to say. So we're going to turn now to audience questions, and actually a lot was covered. So I'm sure if you're an audience member who actually submitted a question, you're going to think my question got answered. But we have a few here, and one that really struck me, especially as we talk about benchmarking these other states, and it's clear that other states are doing amazing things. But even if we kind of like raise our game and meet them at their benchmarking level, what are we thinking about, what are we doing to get ahead, right? Like what are we doing to think about leapfrogging these other states who are clearly doing things well?
Yeah, I mean, the competition isn't static, right? We have to grow not just at their rate, but at a faster rate. So I think what we've seen in the last couple of years are we had a lot of surpluses and one-time dollars coming from the federal government. Some of that's been invested in accelerants, trying to put more people into college, for instance, trying to help people remove barriers like childcare. I think there's a lot of different intervention points that actually would unblock a significant amount of growth in our state. And so there are key places. I'd say universal pre-K is a good one. If we can enact that, it actually would help with childcare, it would help with talent migration and attraction, and it would help with education performance.
Yeah, and I know we've talked a lot about education, which is critical, and we talk a lot about college-bound education, and I know we've got students in the room today. But, in our industry, in the automotive industry, we have a situation at Ford where for the first time we actually are hiring non-college educated folks, right, in the software arena. And so there's a lot to be said about these certifications and stackable certifications that are coming. I'd love your thoughts on how we're thinking about that as we think about the bigger education picture and making sure that people are poised for success.
I think the smartest employers, Mary, are doing exactly what you're doing, which is looking at someone's skill set, the credentials that they bring help represent that, but it's not the only way to identify if someone has the skills and the talent needed to be successful within a position. I know many are re-looking at all of their job description, especially as we have the talent crunch that we have, trying to find who is it? Do we need a bachelor's degree for someone who's doing work in a certain space that can be learned on the job? Probably not. But we shouldn't discount the bachelor's degree or the college certifications because they do represent really a lifetime success rate with higher incomes, lower unemployment rates, and the rest. So I think it's got to be an all of the above approach. And we shouldn't forget as well the skilled trades and the certifications and apprenticeships that lead to really, really high quality of life and jobs as well, that are absolutely necessary and in many cases can't be automated.
Rachel, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think, in my past life in energy and in my current life in retail, I think I cannot advocate more strongly for apprenticeship programs. I think that, there's international models like Germany that have really been leaders here, and that's when we should just there's an opportunity to really leapfrog and be innovative.
Yeah.
Well, as you talk about being in retail, and for those of us who shop or go to a restaurant, we know that
God
labor
bless you.
shortages
Yeah.
are incredible, right? You go certain places and you realize that these businesses, it's really hard for them to maintain their kind of customer quality because the labor shortages are just so huge. Do you
Right.
see that getting better?
So yes and no. I think, in the bio, you were talking about being a best place to work for 2 years in a row, and that's something we worked so hard on. I think it hasn't been as acute an issue for us, but I think we also spend a ton of time and resources legitimately making sure that people can make a great living, I think more than they would have ever expected, and being a place that has the sort of work-life balance and flexibility that people are looking for today. So I think really it's winnable, but you really have to work at it.
Jeff, anything on the labor shortages? Anything you see?
I think we're seeing, what we hear from our CEOs is that, well, the talent shortage coming out of the pandemic was horrific in their minds, that they had thousands and thousands of jobs in their individual companies they couldn't fill. They're starting to see more applicants. They're starting to see higher retention rates, and things start to settle out. So that's a positive sign. I think there was one of our CEOs who said, the talent war is over and talent won. So I think power and the certainly where companies are looking for and what they have to do for talent these days has changed, I think, for the better and probably permanently.
So as you have the students in the room today, and I know you met with them earlier, but we didn't really get a chance to talk about what you see as sort of the future of work, what it looks like in Michigan. Like, what do you think the major kind of job creation areas are going to be for the state of Michigan moving forward?
I think there's going to be a ton of jobs at Michigan Central Station, and that the companies and the innovation that's going to be happening there is going to be leading the country. But in truth, that's a lot of what, when we think about diversifying the economy, it's anchors like Michigan Central Station. It's anchors like the Detroit Center for Innovation that is going to be coming to Corktown, a partnership between the University of Michigan, Illich, and related companies. It's the medical mile in Grand Rapids. It's those things that create density in our state where, again, people want to move here because there's the talent that's already experienced within the industry, because they know they have colleagues. And I'll tell you, as somebody who's looked at other opportunities around the country, it's very scary to think that you would come into a company in a region and not have a competitor that potentially you could get a promotion to, or that you could go to at some point. If you're an individual company without a lot of ecosystem, that's tough. So we've got to create these ecosystems, and I think, Mary, what you're doing at Michigan Central, not to give you another plug, but is really essential to that.
Well, thanks. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually shift gears and we're going to have some fun. So we're going to end this conversation on a high note with some fun questions. So we call this the lightning round, and I'm just going to ask Rachel and Jeff, and if you want Dustin to chime in.
Dustin should be in this. Come on.
You should be in as well. So we're going to do this really fast. So I'm going to start with what did you want to be when you were growing up, Dustin?
Cowboy.
Cowboy? Rachel?
I always like policy.
Teacher.
Teacher. Well,
There we go.
makes sense. Okay, I have to ask this, being from Ford. I can imagine you can guess what the question is. Dustin, what was your first car?
A 1989 Plymouth Acclaim.
Oh, boo.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Mabel the Sable.
I had a Dodge Spirit, though my favorite car was a Ford Mustang. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Jeff always knows
I
the
drive
right
an
thing to
F-150.
say.
Yeah, right.
That's great. Okay, let's get into, I love this one. something on your anti-bucket list, something you'll absolutely never do again because it was just
Again or ever?
not an enjoyable thing.
Skydiving,
Oh,
sorry.
oh.
Not an adrenaline junkie, apparently.
Skydiving, I'll take that one.
I've never done that. I'll just say go to Las Vegas. The place is terrible.
Agreed.
Burn it down.
Okay, and then to end, I'm going to ask one last thing, which was, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self? And maybe you are 25, so it's a good day to do that.
All right, I'll start. So I would say, when I did this last time, I said, the biggest thing that I've learned and that I would impart to my 25-year-old self is to just be kind to everyone. That you don't know what people are going through, you don't know what's in their life, in their work experience, but kindness is an easy thing to give, and it pays off. And you don't know how, for that potential nice gesture or word or holding of a door helps change people's day. So I would say be kind.
Sure. That's a good one. I would say, probably generally relax, and especially at 25, you think of where people are in the world today. There's so much pressure to be on a very specific career path and be achieving so much. And I think the reality, at least what I found, is you'll have a few different careers in your life, and you can do a lot of different things all at the same time. So don't take it so seriously.
Jeez, all these beautiful
Profound.
answers,
Yeah,
and mine
right.
are terrible. No,
Don't go to Vegas.
I was going to say, yeah, that's pretty good advice at 25.
Yeah, that's pretty good
do
too.
not eat those mushrooms. No. At 25, I think it would have been say yes. I think especially when you're trying to be something in your career or whatever, you tend to want to be in that space and be as good as you can, but sometimes it's just saying yes to things that come to you, and learning with it and rolling with it, and sometimes that gets you where you want to be a lot faster.
I love that. Take advantage of opportunity. It's always the best thing. Well, thank you so much. I'm handing it back to Steve, but I want to thank again our speakers today. I thought it was a great conversation. I'm sure it gave us food for thought about what more we can think about to help Michigan be the best state in the country. So thank you.
Terrific program. Jeff and Rachel, thanks so much for being with us, and we're going to keep this drumbeat going. It's too darn important to the state, and with leaders like you and others in this room, Michigan's going to win this battle. So let's keep this going. Mary and Dustin, you guys are incredible. Thank you for your important voices and roles today as well. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, tell your friends and colleagues to join the DEC. You won't find a better group of people. And I love to say it, on time, every time. This meeting of the Detroit Economic Club is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.